Welcome everybody back to Rhythm Magazine and Colin Woolway with my Getting Started articles. Today we are going to look at what we call stepped hi-hat. Very simply, stepped hi-hat is a note you play with your left foot as opposed to your right stick or your left stick. You could say that when you play jazz, these are stepped notes as opposed to struck notes. Most of the time in this modern age, when we talk about stepped hi-hat notes, we're talking about notes we play with our foot that somehow contribute to the rhythm. And that's what we're going to look at. And before we get started with that, an often asked question is, do I play the hi-hat with my heel down or my heel up? So very, very briefly, if you play with your heel down, you're often encouraging the hi-hat to open and close at a musical interval, like and sometimes if I want to play a stepped note, I might play with my heel up, so I get a very quick note. So the hi-hat literally, the two cymbals literally go up and down as quickly as possible. So there's no actual musical interval between the up and the down. It's really just. So for the purposes of this lesson, I'm going to play with my heel up so that I can get a very quick note and not get any sort of sound. So the first example I'm going to give you is a very simple straight eighth note groove with a 16th note stepped before the backbeat. So I'll go 1, 2, and 3, 4. Actually, you should have described that as 1 and a 2, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You might want to practice that just to get that note nice and quick. So let's try it with the bass and snare. So before you start trying anything out, just do it slowly like I did and make sure that you get with no going on. A little bit faster. The sharp-eared amongst you will notice I did get a little thing there, but that just makes me concentrate harder and really work with that quick stepped hi-hat note. For the next example, I'm going to put the step note after the backbeat. So you see there I'm combining a step note before and after. Just all there to experiment with. An interesting concept with the stepped hi-hat note is to regard it as a separate sound source, a separate note. It's not necessarily a substitute for a struck hi-hat note. If I play some 16ths like this, so a broken 16th pattern, I can put a stepped hi-hat note in the space, and the idea is it just creates a different kind of feel for the groove. It's a different note. And in fact, I've heard things on records where I've wondered how the drummer played it and made it sound like that. It later turned out to be a stepped hi-hat note. In fact, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover is a good example of a stepped hi-hat note creating a groove. Anyway, back to these 16ths. So what I'm going to do is That's what I'm practicing. In the groove context, I'm going to do it every other time. Quite nice, really. There you go. Now for your practice challenge, here's just an exercise that sounds nice, could be very useful, especially in the jazz context. Jazz drummers tend to use a stepped hi-hat really much more than rock drummers do as a separate note, as a separate sound source. And here's a way of getting into that. I'm going to play 16th notes, which I'll divide into groups of 4, playing the stepped hi-hat note on the last note. And then I'm going to divide them into groups of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 2/8 notes at the end, like this. So this is the practice challenge in your magazine, the 4th example in your mag. If we play it slowly, it will sound like this. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4. Let's just go a wee bit faster. There you go, add another element to your playing, another voice to your repertoire. See you next time.